Absolutely. Well, obviously we're talking about these albums, these wonderful little digipacks. They're really great. These are released on the 28th of April,
Mhm.
if I'm correct, and I will put a
Yeah,
purchasing link just below this video. So obviously this
brilliant.
brings about my first question. What's prompted this reissue program?
Well, it's something that we've been discussing for years and years. I mean, a long time, and we've had it sort of set up, ready to go for a while, and then things have catalyst cancelled, and then of course pandemic, and it's kind of it's coincided now with a kind of period of for us relative inactivity because obviously Danny's recovering from his injury, so that's going to take a little while. And we just thought, well, it's probably about the best possible time to do it when there's nothing much else going on, and then we can give it as much of our attention as need be. And it's I guess 30 odd years, which is a terrifying number, but it just sort of felt like the right time, and yeah, so here we are. I mean, people have been asking us about this for a long time, so it's good to actually have finally done it.
Right. Is there going to be more stuff? Is there lots of stuff in the vaults to come out, maybe?
Well, the plan is that we're going to work our way through the albums and re-release the whole catalogue if we can.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of what's in the vaults, it's we're discovering bits and pieces all the time. We've got lots and lots and lots of live recordings over the years that have not been released, and or mixed or listened to since they were done. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a bit of a voyage of discovery for us as well in some ways. And obviously, as we move forward through this project, we'll be kind of listening to old stuff and seeing what we have, and using it where applicable.
Yeah, yeah. We go way back to these when these well, the first album even. I mean, what was the transition like between Terraplane and Thunder? Was it a difficult time for you?
No, it's the opposite, really. I think with Terraplane, we got to the point where we'd released two albums, and we were with a label that didn't really, I think, despite the fact they were very successful at the time, Epic Records and CBS were very successful. They were a pop label. They had acts like Wham, Sade, Paul Young,
Yeah,
and they didn't really know what to do with Terraplane, and that was kind of compounded by a fact that we hadn't really kind of landed squarely on what it was we were trying to do. So we were kind of, influenced by other opinions a little bit, and listening to other people. And I think probably because we were sort of trying to find ourselves. And I think when that all kind of came to grief, when that sort of finished, in going through the process, like I said, we made two albums. We toured professionally for the first time, and we'd learned a hell of a lot.
yeah,
It felt a bit like an apprenticeship. And when it kind of finally fell away, myself and Danny jumped on the plane, went to the States, saw what was going on over there, and particularly informative was a trip to Los Angeles, where seeing the whole kind of scene on Sunset Strip in the sort of mid to late 80s, and
well, but that
see,
was an eye opener.
it was, yeah. And we thought, well, we don't really fit here because we're not really a hairspray spandex kind of band, but
Yeah.
there was an energy with some of the rock coming out, particularly Guns N' Roses,
Oh yeah,
was a very good rock and roll band, and we thought, well, maybe that's kind of what we wanted to do all along, was make great rock music, and somehow we lost our way a little bit. So that kind of gave us a sense of purpose, and we came back from that trip with a very kind of clear idea, really, what we were doing. And I'd written, I think probably "Dirty Love." She's "Dirty Love" and something I can't remember which other song had already been written. And I thought, well, this is kind of going in a direction here, and that coincided as well with us meeting Andy Taylor,
yeah,
and we were still Terraplane when we met Andy, but he got it straight away. It's amazing how an outside point of view see things clearly, and he just went. He said, "What the fuck are you doing? You're a great blues rock band. That's what you should be doing." And
yeah,
that kind of put it in a nutshell.
yeah, yeah,
And then he and I wrote a couple of tunes together as well, and that was it. We were off to the races really. But once we kind of got it,
yeah.
we kind of knew we'd got it right. It was funny for the first time ever when we were making that first album. We all sat there going, this is going to do well. We've got this. We've nailed it. We've got it.
Yeah.
And having sort of been around the block a little bit, we that experience was invaluable. So Terraplane, although it felt like it at the time was a bit of a flop, but it was not. The education was not lost on us, shall we say?
Well, actually, you preempted my next question, which was, how did Andy Taylor get involved with this band? I mean, he's not somebody I would associate with blues, hard rock, really.
Yeah, which is funny because that's exactly how he started.
Oh,
He
okay.
started up in obviously he's a Geordie, and he's same kind of vintage as us really. And he grew up listening to Mott the Hoople, Led Zeppelin, rock, David Bowie. He loved Mick Ronson. He was a big fan of Mick Ronson. So
Yeah.
he was kind of coming from the same place. And when we met him, he was kind of once again he was having a bit of a period where he wasn't sure what he was doing. He wanted to produce, but he didn't kind of quite know. He wanted to produce a rock band, but he wasn't sort of sure if he could find one in England. And then it's not particularly rock and roll this, but we had the same accountant.
Yeah.
and and the accountant, we were talking to the accountant, and we said, we really want to find a producer before we do a record deal. And he said, "Oh, are you familiar with Andy Taylor?" And I wasn't a massive fan of Duran. I realised they're great, very good pop songs and stuff, but I was a massive fan of Power Station.
Yeah, yeah.
And the big drums, big guitars. And I said, "Great, when can we meet him?" And they set up a meeting, and he and I got on very well straight away, which was good.
Yeah.
And I think on their second meeting, we wrote "She's So Fine." So,
Okay.
yeah, we just kindred spirits. Got it. He got it. He knew what we were trying to do. Like I said, he made things very simple, and I think we got ourselves in a bit of an overcomplicated knot before that. And he just went, "Turn it up, drink more, have fun," and that
Oh,
was
well,
it.
that's the way to do it.
Sound advice.
Well, I was interested you'd supported Aerosmith, and I just wonder if were they accommodating? Do you have any story? Because I've heard some stories about support bands who supported Aerosmith. I'm just wondering what your experience was like.
Ours was great. I think it was helped because the guy who engineered and mixed Backstreet Symphony is a guy called Mike Fraser.
Yeah.
And the reason Fraser got involved with us was because when I heard Permanent Vacation, the Aerosmith album, I said to our manager, whoever recorded this, we need him because I feel like I'm in the room with the band when I listen to this record. And he kind of was responsible for, I think, moving the recording of rock music onwards a bit. Anyway, we found out it was based in Vancouver. And, once again, before we had a record deal even, we got in touch with them, sent them some demos and said, look, we think you're great.
Yeah.
We think you can really help us. And, I think it would be a great deal. And he wrote back saying, brilliant, I'm in. He said, I'll come to England and do it. I'll have English beer. So it was like, great. And so Fraser got involved and he just literally finished recording Pump with Aerosmith.
Okay.
So when he was in the studio doing Pump, obviously we'd sent our demos across to him and he was playing our demos in the studio when he was working with Aerosmith. And Steven Tyler came in and went, well, this is great, who's this? So there was a kind of awareness and that really helped. So when we were opening for them, I think it was only one or two, it's only a couple of shows, I think. I can't remember, it's so long ago. But he knocked on our dressing room door and said, hi. He said, who wrote that? And he started singing Don't Wait For Me. I said, that was me. He said, oh man, it's a great tune. And yeah, we got on fine with them. I know that there was obviously there's a degree of the Aero Police and the stories about no alcohol in the building and all that, but we didn't experience any of that. We got on fine with them.
Oh, good. I mean, there was Robbie Steinhardt from Kansas talks about almost getting into fisticuffs with Steven Tyler when he tried to turn Kansas down when they were supporting them and things like that. I just wondered if you had any stories like that or experiences like that.
I think we didn't experience any of that, to be fair.
Yeah. Maybe it was early on in the days. Maybe they were a bit more competitive or something then. But you also supported, I think you were on the bill with Van Halen and Bon Jovi. I mean, that must have been pretty exciting.
Well, the most exciting thing about it for us was that two things. One, we were playing in Wembley Stadium for the first time, so that was.
Is that the old Wembley Stadium that's not there anymore?
No, yes, proper Wembley Stadium.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saw the Stones there a few years ago and Floyd and all those sort of bands, but great venue.
Yeah, I'm being obviously a football fan, and being on the same bill. I mean, Bon Jovi were kind of, I guess it's fair to say, weren't really our favourite band,
right?
But we, kind of grew up with Van Halen a little bit. So, and being kind of in sort of on the same bill as them was quite a thrill. So, yeah, we enjoyed it. I mean, we got to Wembley and we did what the Faces used to do. We went on with a big bag of footballs and kicked them into the audience. So we could all say, I kicked a ball at Wembley.
Yeah.
That ticked that little box. After the second show, actually, it was a knock on the dressing room door after we'd finished, and it was Van Halen's tour manager, and he said, would you like to come meet the guy? So we were like, yeah.
Okay.
We hadn't, it was they'd sort of approached us. It was really weird because we was trying to keep ourselves to ourselves, being quite English. And anyway, we got invited in the dressing room, and it was fantastic. I got to meet Eddie and shake his hand, and it was great because I just said to him, you ruined my guitar playing for 2 years after I first heard you, trying to figure out all that. And he laughed, and he said, "You're not the first person to say that." And anyway, we got talking about golf, and I said, "Oh, what's your handicap?" He said, "Oh, it's about 19." And I said, "I knew there'd be one thing I could do better than you."
Excellent.
It was great. It was quite surreal. There were various people in the dressing room. Robert Downey Jr. was in their dressing room. Another actor. So it's very odd. But they were very, very nice. And I think it was in a period where they were cleaning up. And so they're all very kind of sober and off the drugs at that point, I think. But it was great actually. At that point? Was that?
Was David Lee Roth with them at that point?
No, it was just Sammy Hagar.
Okay, great singer.
It was great, and the great part as well was that Eddie's guitar tech was very nice, and he said, "Come and stand with me." So I went and stood with him and watched Eddie from about 10 feet away, and it was like standing next to George Best kicking a football. It was an amazing experience.
I bet it was. I read somewhere you did the lion's share of the writing on Laughing on Judgment Day. I just wonder, is that a pattern with Thunder? Are you the main writer in the band?
Yeah, I think on albums sort of 2 to 4, the others kind of made the odd contribution. Yeah, but no, apart from that, it's all me. I think it's just because it's kind of evolved that way. I think probably because I'm the person who's genuinely interested in writing. I love doing it. It's that's what I spend most of my time doing. So where the others kind of enthusiasm waned a little bit, so I just ended up as being my job, and so it's down to me.
I've got to ask you, how influential is American rock, and were you listening to a lot of Steely Dan and Tom Petty when you recorded Dopamine?
Yes. yes.
Right.
Yes. Steely Dan, probably, one of my favourite bands. A massive fan, had been since the 70s.
Right.
And I had a friend. My first job, actually, when I left school, I was an assistant photographer for a while. And the guy I worked for had a mate. He was obviously a photographer, and he had a mate who was a photographer at the Melody Maker.
Yeah.
And he used to get given all these American imports. So I kind of get to hear a lot of these American bands that maybe a lot of my mates weren't listening to.
Right.
Stuff like Nils Lofgren and early, the first Tom Petty album. Before there was an awareness of it here. And I love all that stuff's a massive thing for me. Yeah, very much.
Did you get a lot of shit from the band when you wanted to put a saxophone on? Which track is it on that? Is it Big Pink Supermoon?
Supermoon, yeah. No, actually, funny enough, now they've stopped moaning now. But everybody in Thunder must particularly, we all grew up in South London, and we've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
And we all listen to all sorts of music. I mean, with particularly Danny and myself, have always been big fans of soul music, American music, and because it's just the era we grew up in the 70s.
Yeah.
There was lots of great music in all sorts of different genres, and we all, if you look at our record collections, they're all quite eclectic, I think. So, sax is a very unfashionable instrument at the moment. I mean, I think the 80s didn't do the saxophone any favours because it was everywhere. And people like David Sanborn and whatever got a lot of responsible, but it's a particular style. Whereas I loved sort of people like Junior Walker and sort of 60s and 50s sax. I love, and it was just like, oh god, what are we going to do here? We need another bloody guitar solo, and I just thought, the track felt like it was a nice groove, and it wanted to go on until it sort of fell to pieces. So, and I thought, why don't we get a sax? And everyone looked at me like, where are we going to get a sax from? And I said, well, I know a man who knows a man. And this guy who is based in Cardiff, and his name escapes me in a minute, it's on the sleeve somewhere, but he's a fantastic musician, but he's slightly agoraphobic. He never leaves the house. So you have to send the stuff to him and trust him to do a good job.
Yeah. So
I sent the track over to him, and my only points of reference were Junior Walker and the sax solo on FM by Steely Dan. I said, do what you like. Yeah. And he sent back 2 takes, both of which were quite marvellous, and we struggled to pick the better one. But it was great fun to do that.
Yeah, I mean, coming from someone who was actually in the thick of it at the time, I'm just wondering from your perspective, was grunge a good thing for rock music? And what do you remember where were you when you first heard "Smells Like Teen Spirit"? What did you think of that?
Okay, that's a good question. Well, I love it. I love that. I mean, that Nirvana album's fantastic. And I think we were kind of sort of in the epicenter of it in a weird kind of way because
Yeah.
um, in 91, was initially Backstreet Symphony came out on Capitol Records. The guy that ran Capitol Records didn't like rock music very much, so we managed to get ourselves off the label and we ended up on Geffen.
Right.
And Geffen obviously were very much rock to the fore at the time. You know, they had Aerosmith, Whitesnake, Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
So it was a better place for us to be, really. And we kind of arrived just probably about 6 months before grunge in America, anyway. First single did very well. We were all over MTV like a rash, and we thought we were off to the races in America. We had a tour booked with David Lee Roth and Cinderella, I think it was. But their American manager rang and said, "Unpack, guys, the tour's not selling." We were like, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, grunge." And we said, "Well, what's grunge?" And he said, "Okay, there's this kind of bands coming out of Seattle, and it's a bit kind of edgy rock. It's sort of a bit back to basics, and it's a bit punky, and it's a bit similar." So we kind of found ourselves going over. We got, oddly enough, not long after that, we got invited to play at a party to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Rip magazine,
Okay.
which is kind of the American Kerrang, I guess. So we tacked on a few other club dates to warm up. When we got to this show, it was at the Palladium in LA, and on the bill was ourselves, Spinal Tap, band from Australia called the Screaming Jets,
Okay.
Nirvana, not Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains, and we're all on the same bill. And it was very odd because it was 3 dressing rooms. We were sharing a dressing room with Spinal Tap and Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
And it was very odd. We went on. There was probably about 1,000 people there. And it was almost like the parting of the Red Sea. On one side of the room were a load of people that were very kind of hip LA kids who were just wanted grunge and were dressed the part. And on the other side of the room were the kind of poodle-haired rocker types.
Right.
And we went down great with one half of the room and not so well with the others because I think they thought we represented this hair metal thing, which we always saw ourselves as a blues rock band. But anyway, but it was interesting watching all those bands because I just thought that Soundgarden sounded a bit like Black Sabbath. Nirvana reminded me of a punk band, but they were much more musical than that. The songs were much better, and I thought most of them were great. Pearl Jam were very, 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 very good, and very, very nice lads. For me, there was never an issue, but I think what the industry always has to champion the new thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it did, but the radio formats in America all changed kind of overnight, really. So that didn't really help us in America at all. So I have mixed feelings about it. I think musically I liked a lot of it, but it kind of blew us out of the water a little bit in America. But these things happen.
Right. I read in the Yorkshire Times that they described Wonder Days as a real return to form. I thought, well, that suggests to me that they feel it was a loss of form somewhere. And I'm going to ask you, the Bang album, was it a difficult album to make? And do you agree with them?
Well, Bang isn't my favourite Thunder album. I think in the noughties when we were completely flying solo, as it were, we were releasing the albums ourselves, and the reason that we stopped really at the end of that period was because I think we all felt a bit like the old hamster in the wheel syndrome. We were doing the same thing every year, and I think it did us good to stop because I think I needed to do something different as the kind of creative person in the band that writes the songs. And so it was good for me to step away from it for a while. And I think Bang, there's a couple of good tunes on it, but it's not my favourite Thunder album. Let's put it that way. So when people said Wonder Days was a return to form, I didn't necessarily disagree. I think that over a 30-year career and 14 studio albums, the likelihood of them all being absolutely 5-star AAA all the way is slim, no matter who you are.
Yeah, but Wonder Days, what a great album that was.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think there was a lot of energy in that, and I think it's just really because I stepped away from writing Thunder songs for like 7 years, and it really helped me.
Yeah. There was a David Coverdale rumor that he was wanted to pinch you or something. Is that a load of nonsense? Was that true?
Yeah, it's nonsense. He was very. I know he liked the band, and when we first met in 1990 maybe,
Yeah.
he came into a dressing room. I was at Donington actually. Came into a dressing room and said, "Oh, a magnificent group, wonderful blues, and Lucifer, I love your playing, darling." And
Sounds
yeah,
just
and
like him.
we've been on the same bill with him many times over the years, and and we always have a chat, and he's always fun. He's kind of like the Alec Guinness of rock.
He is.
uh, but no. He said some really nice things about me in something, and I think it was at a time when they were between guitar players, which they were a lot, to be fair.
They were. They
I
were.
think people put two and two together and made five, and yeah, no truth in it at all.
Well, the bringing up David Coverdale, of course, segues nicely into the last question I have for you, and that is Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple?
Zeppelin,
Right.
tough one, tough one. It's a tough one, but Deep Purple, I think, have made the greatest live album of all time. It made in Japan for me.
Yeah.
I think that's unsurpassed as a live recording of rock and roll. But the sheer creativity of Zeppelin and the musicianship and the timelessness of the tunes, an amazing band.
Absolutely, absolutely. Luca, I want to thank you so much for your time today. As I said, I'll hold up these wonderful digipacks again. They will be available on the 28th of April. There is a purchasing link just below this video. Luke, I know you've got another interview to get off to. You have a wonderful day. Again, thank you for
Thank you,
doing
Barry.
it. Okay, all the
All
best,
the
mate.
best.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.